Craig Parker is a lion whisperer. For over 40 years, he has studied these majestic creatures in Africa from the Serengeti to the Maasai Mara. He has seen them at their most playful and their most savage. He has studied lion attacks on prey and on humans, and he has come up with ways to protect them from extinction. Parker is a professor at the University of Minnesota and the director of the Lion Research Center. He is a world-renowned expert on lions, and his work has helped to shape our understanding of these animals. He is also a passionate advocate for lion conservation, and he has worked tirelessly to protect them from the threats of habitat loss, trophy hunting, and conflict with humans. In this podcast, I talk to Parker about his work on lion conservation. We discuss the challenges facing lions today, the strategies that are being used to protect them, and the future of these magnificent creatures. Join me on this journey into the world of lions, the kings of the savannah. I'm your host, Steve Mokaya.
Since 1978, I started out working in the Serengeti until 2014. And since then, I've been looking at lions in Namibia and Botswana in South Africa, and most recently in the Maasai Mara in Kenya.
He says that there has been widespread lion-human conflict in the Maasai Mara National Reserve. He explains that this is because the lions have been killing the livestock of the community living around the reserve. In retaliation, the people whose animals have been killed by the lions have attacked and killed the lions.
And so the lions take the cattle mostly. And so there's been some problems there for some time. People are kind of crowded on the edges. And so the lions don't respect the boundaries and they go across and they still take livestock. So it's a constant push and pull between conservation and looking in the interests of the local livelihoods.
However, Parker notes that private tour companies and conservationists are working to protect the lions of the Mara Reserve. They have leased part of the community land surrounding the reserve and turned it into conservancies, which will act as a buffer zone for both the lions and the people.
But there's also been some really interesting approaches to trying to reduce that conflict. The most important being the formation of the Mara conservancies just to the northeast and west of the Mara Reserve itself, where these are areas that are community owned, but they lease their land out to lodges and tour companies because there's such a strong tourism economy there. And so people have definite incentives to protect these dangerous animals.
Parker notes that, according to his research, lions in Tanzania attacked crop farmers and ate them for food, while in Kenya, particularly among the Maasai community, lions attacked people in self-defense.
We did a study in southern Tanzania between Dar es Salaam along the coast all the way down to the Mozambique border, which was a hot spot for lion attacks on people. And the victims down there were all subsistence farmers. And so these are not communities that are particularly well armed. They don't have guns or spears. And so they were really pretty defenseless. In contrast, the Maasai carry weapons to protect their livestock against lions, and the lions are much, much more careful. Almost all the attacks that we know of on Maasai are when people are trying to defend their livestock, and the lions sort of shake them off or try to get past them to get to the livestock. Although there is a long cultural tradition of young Maasai men wanting to kill lions. This is called Olamayo, and in those situations, these young men will go out in groups and try to kill the lions with their spears. And so when the lions are cornered, they'll lash out. And so that's another time that people are attacked. But that's very different in the pastoralist areas, whereas in southern Tanzania, people were being attacked to be eaten as food.
According to the Kenya Wildlife Service, KWS, there have been an average of 200 lion attacks on humans in Kenya each year over the past decade. However, the number of these attacks has been increasing in recent years, with 250 attacks reported in 2022. The majority of lion attacks in Kenya occur in the Maasai Mara National Reserve and the Amboseli National Park. These two parks are home to large populations of lions, and they are also located close to human settlements. In May 2023, 10 lions were killed by herders in the Amboseli ecosystem after they reportedly wandered into human settlements in search of food. In July 2023, a lion was caught on a CCTV camera at night in a neighborhood in Nairobi, pointing to an increased trend of wild animals wandering outside their parks. Professor Parker said that the government should build a strong fence around the parks to prevent lions and other wild animals from going into residential areas.
So, protecting people against dangerous animals like lions should be the highest priority. Their national parks are meant to be fenced to keep the lions and the elephants inside the reserves. Nairobi Park has a fence on several sides to try to keep the lions and elephants out of people's residential areas. As people continue to move closer and closer to these protected areas, and of course Nairobi is already built up. And I think one of the problems we've seen with Nairobi Park is as people have begun to live and settle and do more habitat conversion in Kitengela. In the past, Kitengela, that side was not fenced because the wildlife needed to go out during different times of year. In many of our parks in East Africa, the herbivores are migratory and they range over very broad areas. And so it's not a good idea to have had a fence in those places. But as the habitat is being converted along those edges, and you see more and more farms and you see more and more settlements, then I'm afraid we're going to have to live up to the fact that there are limits to how far any animals should go out anymore.
However, Parker says that fencing parks is good for protecting human life, but is not quite good for lions and other wild animals, which he says are migratory and territorial. He says that in the past, these parks were not fenced and wild animals moved from one habitat to another, but with the fences today, they can't do that, and that limits wildlife population.
I don't think that's good news for the abundance of animals that we're used to seeing in Nairobi Park. And so I suspect that the numbers may go down, and then that might be part of the reason some of the lions always want to leave. But also lions want to leave these areas because, once your core area of a park is saturated with lion prides who are very territorial, then you get youngsters who have no place to settle, and so they'll leave looking for somewhere else. And that's a real problem. As the population continues to grow, as habitat is converted to other uses, whereas in the past, there was some kind of connectivity between, Nairobi maybe and all the way to Amboseli. They can't do that anymore.
He also notes that drought and climate change have worsened human-wildlife conflict, and that conservation of the Mara ecosystem and the preservation of livestock in the surrounding communities must be done in tandem.
We know that with the droughts that are going on with climate change now, we've just come out of a 3-year drought, and people losing any livestock on top of the losses due to drought, starvation in their livestock is really significant. And so much of what I'm thinking about these days is really how we can best meet the needs of conservation in and around the Mara, because it does bring in so much revenue to those communities, while at the same time working with the communities to figure out how we can minimize their losses to lions, either by helping with the reinforced bomas that are now quite common in southern Kenya, but also be better in terms of livestock production itself. One of the things that you may notice if you go to the Mara, and especially if you're as old as I am, if you compare what the Mara looks like now with what it looked like many years ago, the first thing you'll notice is the grass is so short. And so they were very susceptible to the drought with starvation. It's not good to have too many livestock, even from the point of view of people's livelihoods. And so we have to figure out how we can work together with communities, finding ways to ultimately restore the grass, because it's the grass that attracts the wildebeest up from Tanzania. It's the grass that sustains all the wildlife species that the tourists come to see. And it's also the grass that supports the livelihoods of the Maasai themselves.
He says that a recent study indicates that East Africa will experience more frequent droughts, and so there is a greater need of the communities around national parks and reserves to adapt ways to coexist with livestock and the jungle animals in preparation of the imminent droughts.
Developing nations are the victims of the climate change that's really been caused by the Western nations, the industrialized world. So it's not the fault of local people. There is a new study that just came out last week that suggests those prolonged droughts in East Africa are probably going to become more common in the next century. So that means we're going to see 50% more of these droughts, and that's got to be adapted to. So what we have to do is to recognize that we have to be ready for the next drought. It's going to happen regardless of what we do. What we can do in the meantime is to try to reduce our livestock holdings so that there won't be as many livestock vulnerable to the drought. There'll be more grass left over by the time we go into the drought. And also, we need to start thinking about ways that we can more effectively restore the land that has been degraded by overgrazing over the last 15 to 20 years. We need to be very much proactive, to really invest a lot in trying to bring back some of the species of grasses and forbs that may be missing now from some of our pastures.
Parker says that the habitats of lions in Africa have been shrinking in the past years, and that has reflected a sharp decrease in the population of the big cats in the continent.
Lion habitat across the entire continent of Africa has shrunk by about 90% over the last century. In terms of how many lions there are in all of Africa, what I think the consensus is of most people is somewhere between 20 and 30,000 in all of Africa. That's why places like the Mara and the Serengeti and Tsavo, etc., they're really important, because there aren't many places left that have a substantial number of lions anymore.
Besides retaliatory killings by people, Parker says that lion trophy hunting in the countries that allow their practice has led to a decline in the lion population.
The dark side of lion behavior is that male lions, when they first enter into a new pride, a new social group, if there are any small cubs there, then those mothers will not be receptive for breeding for another year or so. And so rather than waiting for those cubs to grow up, the males kill the cubs. And so they're infanticidal. And so that infanticide then allows the males to replace the stepchildren, as it were, with their own biological offspring. And this happens all the time. And so with trophy hunting, hunters want to shoot an adult male. And if that adult male is in a pride, then he needs to stick around to protect his cubs against these kinds of replacements. And so if you have a hunting strategy, a sport hunting strategy, that is shooting off all these males literally a month or two after they've had new cubs of their own, then the cubs are going to be repeatedly killed off by replacement males. And that would cause the whole population to go into decline.
He and other researchers conducted a study that proved that trophy hunting is detrimental to the lives of lions and biodiversity. Their research informed a crucial policy change. Trophy hunters are now banned from killing male lions unless they are very old.
In these countries that do allow lion sport hunting, you could see that the sport hunters were shooting males that were barely adult. Some of them were still subadult. The clients are only going to shoot a young male that barely even has a tuft of mane if there's no big males left. And so we actually were able to get some data and showing that the current practice was actually causing the lion populations to go into decline. And so because we were able to show the impacts and suggest an alternative, that then became policy. The policy has been adopted in Tanzania, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa.
Over the years of his research about lions in Africa, Professor Parker has discovered amazing things about lions' lives. For instance, he says lion mothers isolate themselves for over a month before and after giving birth. The newborns also share and maintain a common territory with their brothers and sisters. The territory chiefs also count the number of lions in their territory to know if there are enemy lions around.
When they first give birth, the mothers are very solitary and secretive, giving birth in a thicket somewhere, and you don't see anything for the first few weeks. And then after their cubs are about 5 or 6 weeks old, they bring them out to the rest of the pride. And all the cubs then that were born about the same time are raised together for the next 2 years. And during that time, the mothers nurse each other's cubs. They defend them against other species, against dangerous, strange lions. And then, lions sometimes are really cooperative when they hunt, especially when they're trying to catch big things like buffalo. But then even more important in all this is that if you hear a lion roaring at night, that's part of a territorial call. And lions are counting. They're keeping track of how many neighbors there are, so they can count. And what really matters more than almost anything in lion life is maintaining a shared territory with your sisters or with your brothers.
Additionally, he reveals that the color of the male lion's mane means a lot about that particular lion in terms of strength and tenacity.
The quality of the male is reflected in the color of his mane. And so these males they have more surviving offspring, etc. So the blacker the mane, the stronger and the more domineering individual. He's going to have more testosterone, he's going to have better survival, and you wouldn't want to meet him in a fight.
Parker further reveals that there is rivalry between lions and leopards and hyenas because they too prey on cubs.
Lions kill leopards and they just strangle them and then they'll leave the dead leopard and walk off. Well, I think the main reason that they kill those is that the leopards and the hyenas are predators on lion cubs. So we know that leopards, if you have leopards in your neighborhood, you might find that your domestic dogs start disappearing. And leopards will also eat lion cubs, and they'll eat the lion cubs for food, as will hyenas will eat lion cubs for food.
In addition to the conservation and biodiversity benefits of protecting lions, Professor Parker argues that Africa should also protect lions because they are a major symbol of the continent. Lions are associated with Africa in popular culture and imagination, and their extinction will be a loss to the continent's identity.
And this is part of our culture, this is part of our traditions. And if we were to lose the lion, it would be like losing part of our soul, part of our heart. And I think that feeling is very deep in many African societies.
I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of lions with me, your host, Steve Mokaya. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me again next time for another episode. For now, bye.